What's up, punks? Welcome back to the vlog. This session is our first of 2022. We are playing 2-5 no limit at Parx Casino here outside Philadelphia. We have a lot of interesting hands in this one, a lot of big pots, so make sure to hit that like and subscribe buttons because it really helps the channel get noticed by YouTube and get these videos out to more grinders like you. Also, feel free to leave questions or comments down below. I read all of them and I really appreciate the feedback so I can keep making the channel better. So, without any further ado, let's get to the action.
Okay, we kick off this session in the big blind. We look down at ace-6 of clubs. There's straddle on, middle position player calls, hijack calls, button calls, small blind calls. So we go and flow and we call as well. The under the gun player limps, so with $60 in the pot, we go to a flop of 9-7-4 rainbow. Small blind leads out here for $40. We have a open-ender and a backdoor flush draw, so we make the call, the hijack calls, and the button calls. With $220 in the pot, we go to a turn, which is the jack of clubs. It's a good card for us because it brings in that backdoor flush draw, but it really would have been better if it were something like the 10 of clubs to really get us there with the redraw, but we're happy with it. We're planning to check raise whoever we can here. When the small blind checks to us, we check in flow, trying to induce the trap, and to our delight, the hijack takes the bait and bets $100. When the button and small blind fold, I go into the tank for a minute and try and think of what kind of sizing could get the job done here. So I raise to $300. Unbeknownst to me, at the time, this player in the hijack is a bit sticky and doesn't like to fold, so he ends up making the call. And with $820 in the pot, we go to a river, which is the money card. 5 of diamonds. So we get there with our straight. I think it's pretty well concealed straight, and we're thinking that since he called that check raise on the turn, we can get some value here on the river. So we size up to $500, which is roughly a 2/3 pot size bet. Unfortunately for us, he makes the fold. Although it's a good pot to start with, we would have really loved that call on the river, but we're off to a good start. For this next hand, we are on the button with Jack-10 offsuit. There is an under the gun limp, then it folds to me. I make it $20 to go. Blinds fold, under the gun comes along, so with 47 in the pot, we go to a flop. Flop looks good to me with Jack-3 deuce. Under the gun checks to me, and I bet out for $40. Under the gun just flats here, so with 127 in the pot, we go to a turn, which is the king of clubs. Under the gun checks again. I'm thinking that this player has to have something in the range of pocket 7s through pocket 10s, maybe a Jack X hand. I don't think the king hit him, so I bet out for $65. Under the gun then goes into the tank for a minute and comes up with a check raise to $265. This sizing seems really odd to me because it either screams of a flush draw that didn't get there yet or a flop set. I don't know why a set would want to bet that big and try and induce a fold unless he's really afraid of the flush. But I can't put him on a hand like aces, kings, queens. I can't put him on jacks, especially since I have one of them. So with all that in mind, I make the call and we go to a river, which is the 8 of diamonds. When under the gun checks to me, this seems like it could be a trap. And since I don't want to get raised here and I have decent showdown value, I check back and we get the bad news. He did flop a set, and with that 8 of diamonds on the river, I think we would have lost this hand either way. So, not our best read, and now we just have a little bit of ground to make up. The next hand that we look down at, we are under the gun, and we look down at the beautiful ace-king of diamonds. We raised $35. The player in middle position calls us, the button calls us, and the blinds fold. So with 112 in the pot, we go to a flop of Queen 9-2 with the queen and the 9 of hearts. I check this board since I know the players behind me are pretty sticky and probably won't fold to one bet. Middle position checks, and then the button bets $35. I call to see a turn, and the middle position calls as well. So with 217 in the pot, we go to a turn, which is a great one. We see the ace of spades. I check in flow for deception now, and middle position player checks as well. The button then bets out for $60. I call here since I've seen this player has essentially no range and often just plays any two cards from any position. I'm only going to get called by a better hand if I raise here, so I don't feel that that's a good road to take here. So with that all in mind, I just call this bet. And the middle position player surprisingly calls as well. So with 397 in the pot, we go to a river, which is a 9 of diamonds. Since the flush draw bricked out, I can go for some thin value here. So I bet 125 for just over a quarter size bet. Middle position player folds, which I kind of expected. He seemed kind of weak the whole way. But then the button thinks about it for a minute and puts in a call. He tables ace-5 of hearts. Woohoo! And we are lucky to have dodged those hearts and scoop this pot and move on to the next one. We go card dead a little bit after that last hand, but eventually we pick up a semi-playable hand in the cutoff with 7-8 of hearts. Under the gun limps, middle position limps, and we make it $20 to go. The button calls, the big blind calls, under the gun and middle position both complete, and with 102 in the pot, we go to a flop. 6, 9, 10. Bingo! We flop the nuts. It checks to us, and we bet out for about half pot here, trying to see if there's any takers. So we make it 55. The button calls and the big blind calls. We're glad to see that we have a couple takers here for this bet, and with 267 in the pot, we go to a turn, which is the 5 of hearts. Now this not only is a good card for us and improves us to a flush draw, but it also should be an action card. That action comes straight away when the big blind leads out for 125. I've seen this player do this all night long with marginally strong hands like a pair and a flush draw, 2 pair, and combo draws. He makes his bet whether there's $20 in the pot or $500 in the pot. He just kind of grabs chips and throws them in. With that all said, I start thinking about how much I can get from him. He's been calling light all night, and if he's got one of these aforementioned semi-strong hands, I think he can call a shove. So I want to play for stacks here. I go all in for $1,200. The button immediately folds, and now it's back on the big blind. And he goes well into the tank. This makes me feel good because I know that I have the nuts right now. I have the redraw, which is probably good too. And he is really in the tank here. I'm trying to do my best to make that I'm worried, but I'm pretending not to be worried face so that I can hopefully get a call from him. As he's thinking, unfortunately, he gets called for the PLO game. That kind of divides his attention to the new game he's going to and this hand that he's in. So he tries to get a read on me by showing me that he has 2 pair. Again, I'm trying to do my best to induce this call. I want this call every time because he's drawn to 6 outs. Unfortunately, he ends up folding. Going over the PLO game. I kind of think if he hadn't gotten called for that other game, he might have called. But the fact is, we will never know. But we do scoop a nice little pot here. A couple hands later, we are in the big blind, and we look down at pocket 9s. Under the gun limps. The cutoff raises to 30. We flat here out of position, but in hindsight, I think I prefer a 3-bet here. I'm really not getting any information from this cutoff by just flatting, and I'm really trying to incorporate 3-bets more into my game because I think they will work well, and I'll be able to pick up a lot of pots without contest and without flops. But in the moment, I was thinking to try and set mine for a cheaper price, so I just flatted. The under the gun player calls as well, and we go to a flop with $92 in the pot. And that flop is a good one. Queen 9-3 with the 9-3 of hearts. We smashed this one. We hit middle set, exactly what we were hoping to. So now I check again to conceal this well-hidden set, and I'm trying to think about how much value I'll be able to extract from the aggressor. Under the gun checks as well, and the cutoff leads out for $40, which is exactly what we wanted. Even though it's a coordinated board with a flush draw, I didn't want to tip my hand yet, so I just elect to call and set the trap. Under the gun calls as well. So with $212 in the pot, we go to a turn of 3 of spades. That's right, things go from good to better. We turn our set into a boat, and I continue the deception here with a check. Under the gun checks as well, but to our chagrin, the cutoff checks too. So off to a river we go, which is the Queen of Hearts. No! Ugh. This is probably the worst card in the deck for us, as it counterfeited our boat. We're hoping that one of the other players hit a flush and can't get away from it, so we lead out for $85. Under the gun folds right away, and it goes to the cutoff, who thinks about it for not very long, and then throws his hand in face up. He had the Jack 10 of hearts, so he did hit that flush, but he just could not call. I figure that we weren't going to get a call from a flush, but we had to try. I think any other heart that comes off, he pays us off, but we can't live with hindsight, because if we knew what was coming, we'd win every single pot. So we just got to chalk this one up to a win and take what we get.
A few moments later.
We're in middle position, and we look down at ace deuce of diamonds. It folds to us, and we open for $20 here. The cutoff calls, and the big blind calls. So with 62 in the pot, we go to a flop of 9, 10, Jack, Rainbow. Big blind checks to us, and we stay in the fast lane here, and we lead out for $35. Cutoff quickly calls, and the big blind calls as well. With 167 in the pot, I am pretty much done with this hand until 4 diamonds on the turn. Gives us a bit of a draw here, so when the big blind checks to us again, I know the only way that I have a chance to win this pot is to lead out, so I do that. I do it for $65 this time. This works to get rid of the cutoff, but the big blind is being stubborn and decides to call. So with 297 in the pot, we brick out. With an 8 of spades coming on the river. Big blind checks to us again, and knowing that I really have no showdown value here, I size up to 160. We get the bad news right away when the villain snaps us off and turns over Queen 4 of hearts. So he turned a pair and river to straight. That diamond on the turn really cost us a couple $100, and this, unfortunately, was the start of my session taking a nosedive tonight. Well, we'll have to see if we can get it back at all, but that's not looking good. The very next hand, we are in middle position, and we look down at Queen Jack of hearts. I raise when it's checked to me. I make it $20. We get calls from the button and the small blind. So with $65 in the pot, we go to a flop of Ace, King, 10, Rainbow. Yep, that's right. We flop the nuts. Small blind checks to us. I continue with a bet here of $35 to try and make it seem like I am not as strong as I am. The button calls and the small blind folds. So with 135 in the pot, we go to a turn of the 9 of spades. This brings in a start of the back door flush draw, but since the button called my flop bet, I'm thinking that maybe he has something strong enough that I can size up with here, so I make it 125. Unfortunately, the button folds. I think in hindsight, I don't like this bet. The only thing I'm really going to do is to push out his bluffs that he could have that he might bet for me, and I'm only going to get called by a chop, I guess. Maybe a set, but I think a check here would have been better. I don't think I'm going to get 3 streets of value from this hand, so I should have checked, let him try and steal and pick up some extra value that way. Again, hindsight's always 20/20, so we just got to learn from our mistakes in the future. After blasting off chips on that last hand, we go card dead for a little while till we get a little bit speculative with our next one, where we look down at Queen 9 offsuit, under the gun +1, and we limp, middle position limps, hijack limps, cutoff limps, button limps, small blind completes, big blind checks his option. So we go to a flop only 7 ways here with 35 in the pot, and it comes off Queen Jack 9. When it checks to me, I check this highly coordinated board, and to my surprise, it checks all the way through. So maybe our 9 is good. Still 7 ways, we see a turn of 9 of hearts. This time when it checks to me, I bet out for $40. Just a little feeler to see where I'm at. And the hijack and the button both call. So we go to a river 3 ways with 155 in the pot. And don't you know it, we hit quads. 9 of clubs on the river. At this point, I am just praying one of these other players has a boat and something that they can call with. I don't like checking here because there's a very high probability it's going to check through, especially if they have an under pair. So with all that in mind, with the fact that they called the $40 on the turn, I think I can size up a little bit here, and I try and go for $100. To my dismay, they both quickly fold.
Wrong, sir. Wrong. You get nothing.
And to make matters worse, they were running a high hand promotion at the time, and my quads weren't even good enough to get on the board for it because there was already quad kings on the board. So we hit quads. We don't really get much out of it, but at least it's better than nothing. A couple of hands later, we are in the small blind, and we look down at pocket aces. Under the gun, middle position, hijack, and cutoff all limp, but limping is not going to be an option in this hand.
No, not today.
Being out of position, we size up to a bit of a bigger pre-flop raise and make it $50. We are only called by the cutoff, so with $120 in the pot, we go to a flop heads up of 2-4 jack with a 2 and a 4 of diamonds. This looks like a safe flop for me, and I try to make my big raise pre-flop look like a squeeze play that failed, so I check. Unfortunately, the cutoff does not fall for the trap and checks behind us. So we go off to a turn of the 8 of hearts. Since the cutoff checked this flop, it is unlikely that this improved his hand unless he specifically had pocket 8s. We want to see if we get any more money out of this guy, so we size up just a bit to $85. The villain thinks about it for a moment, and then he calls. With $292 in the pot, we see a river of the jack of clubs. Not the best card for us. We are a little bit worried that he may have had a weak jack when he checked back the flop, like maybe a jack 10 or a jack X suited, and now he's made trips on the river. So with that in mind, and the fact that things hadn't been going well for me in the last little bit, I weekly check with the intention of calling any reasonable sized bet that he puts out. However, the villain quickly checks back and tables 2 red 7s. In hindsight, I think I should have gone for value here, and that's kind of a weakness in my game right now. I think I could have put out a quarter to a third pot size bet, and if I just get played back at, just fold there. But in this hand, at least we won, but we really missed out on some value there at the end that I really think he would have called with the 7s. A couple orbits later, we find ourselves in the cutoff, and we look down at Queen of Diamonds, Jack of Hearts. A middle position player raises to 25. The hijack, small blind, big blind, and I all call. We go to a flop with 125 in the middle, and that flop comes off Jack 8-7 with 2 diamonds. We have top pair here with a good kicker. It checks to the original aggressor, and he bets out for $40. We think about it for a bit, and we just call here. This board's very coordinated and has a flush draw on it, so we don't want to play a bloated pot with a marginal holding. The big blind also comes along behind me, and with 245 in the pot, we go to a turn, which is the 2 of hearts. Big blind and middle position player check to me. I bet on the small side for $75 since there's now a second flush draw out there, and I can easily fold if I get raised here. Both players just call, and we go to a river with $470 in the pot. That river is the 9 of clubs. The big blind now immediately leads off for $300. He's made a lot of plays like this before. A lot of them haven't gone to showdown because a lot of people have been folding to his big river bets. And the middle position player is no different. He quickly folds. This leaves us in quite a pickle. Both flush draws have bricked out. We still have top pair. And in the moment, I'm discounting the four-liner out there because I didn't think he would call two streets with a gut shot. I end up making the call and really should have taken that extra few minutes to think this one through because I get shown the bad news when the villain flips over king of clubs, 10 of diamonds. He got there with his gut shot. If I would have taken a few more minutes to think about this, I might have been able to find a fold since his bet is screaming two pair or better, and I should have realized in the moment that I can't beat that. Unfortunately, in this situation, my testosterone just got the better of me and I just couldn't lay it down, and it cost us quite a bit. A couple orbits later, we find ourselves in the cutoff and we look down at queen of diamonds, jack of hearts. A middle position player raises to 25. The hijack, small blind, big blind, and I all call. We go to a flop with 125 in the middle, and that flop comes off. Jack 8-7 with two diamonds. We have top pair here with a good kicker. Checks to the original aggressor, and he bets out for $40. We think about it for a bit, and we just call here. This board's very coordinated and has a flush draw on it, so we don't want to play a bloated pot with a marginal holding. Big blind also comes along behind me, and with 245 in the pot, we go to a turn, which is the two of hearts. Big blind and middle position player check to me. I bet on the small side for $75 since there's now a second flush draw out there, and I can easily fold if I get raised here. Both players just call, and we go to a river with $470 in the pot. That river is the 9 of clubs. The big blind now immediately leads off for $300. He's made a lot of plays like this before. A lot of them haven't gone to showdown because a lot of people have been folding to his big river bets. And the middle position player is no different. He quickly folds. This leaves us in quite a pickle. Both flush draws have bricked out. We still have top pair. And in the moment, I'm discounting the four-liner out there because I didn't think he would call two streets with a gut shot. I end up making the call and really should have taken that extra few minutes to think this one through because I get shown the bad news when the villain flips over king of clubs, 10 of diamonds. He got there with his gut shot. If I would have taken a few more minutes to think about this, I might have been able to find a fold since his bet is screaming two pair or better, and I should have realized in the moment that I can't beat that. Unfortunately, in this situation, my testosterone just got the better of me and I just couldn't lay it down, and it cost us quite a bit. For our last hand of the night, we find ourselves in middle position. We are planning on leaving when the blinds get to us, and we look down at queen 4 of diamonds. We decide to limp, cut off limps as well, and then the big blind decides to raise to $20. We make the call and the cutoff calls behind us. So with $62 in the pot, we see a flop of queen 5-7. The big blind leads out here for $35. With top pair and a couple of backdoor draws, I call, and then the cutoff calls behind us. With 167 in the pot, we go to a turn of the queen of clubs. Big blind leads out again here, this time for $85. I improve the trips. We make the call thinking that we have most of the queens accounted for, so it's unlikely that he has a queen, and the cutoff folds. With 337 in the pot, we see a river of the 9 of hearts. Big blind leads out again here for a third time and bets $150. Again, thinking that it's very unlikely that he has a queen, and there's not really any obvious draws that got there. I feel that I must have the best hand here, so I shove for $235. The big blind snap calls, at which point we realize that we must be dead. And he confirms that
I've made a huge mistake.
and shows queen, jack, offsuit. I'm done for the night after being shown the felt, and we're just going to have to come back another time and try and get it back.
All right, punks, We were into this session for $1,100. We were out for a big old goose egg with that punt at the end, but you can make it up for me. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Check out these videos over here, some of my other content, and we'll see you next time.